Will driverless cars lead to more sex in cars? That's the finding by a new study, and we'll talk about it on the program today. Plus, we'll be talking with a general manager of a casino in Nevada and how casinos and the gaming industry give folks skills for a lifetime. Do you want to have gender with me? This is a new social media expression. We'll explain what it means. And hello there, Terry here on Think America, where we reason first and then converse. Welcome to America's Radio Town Hall. Every week I invite Terry's Talkers to come on the program with me. They let their hair down on thought-provoking conversation starters. We have Lori, originally from California. She is a white-collar crime investigator, mainly in the insurance industry. Welcome, Lori, from California.
Hi, Terry. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you. And Valir, originally from Illinois. She is a small business owner. She owns a PR firm. Hello, Valir.
Hello, Terry. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Welcome to both of you to the program. Let's get right to it. I want to talk a little bit about Julian Assange. He is in the news again, and he's quite a character whose best skill, I suppose, can be defined as being a computer whiz, but also a computer hacker. He is intelligent, he is sophisticated, and he's risk-taking. In case our listening audience doesn't know, over the past 6 years, he's been holed up in London in an embassy, the Ecuador embassy. Why? For his alleged part in placing U.S. classified cables and documents on his website, and for a charge which got dropped of him assaulting a woman in a sexual crime in Sweden. The Swedish charge has been dropped. So basically, he is there until the WikiLeaks issue, the website that he founded, is actually behind him. My take is that it won't be behind him. He will have to face trial in the United States, probably sooner than later, for his part in using his platform, WikiLeaks, as a dumping ground for classified information. During the 2016 presidential campaign, both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats, when it served those sides individually politically, referred to him as a First Amendment advocate. He was a hero for free speech, and that his platform was no different than, say, the Drudge Report, which is an aggregate site that serves all of these other web platforms, and you can get your news from all kinds of places. But now it seems like he is a criminal. Lori, first to you. You deal with criminals all the time in your work in California. Tell me a little bit how you view this very fascinating character, Julian Assange.
Gosh, he's one of those people you want to sit down and have a glass of wine with sometime. In my mind, he's very, very intelligent. He knows what he's doing. He has a very impressive skill set, if you will, but he is an opportunist. And he will take whatever advantage he can to serve himself. So he can float amongst the Democrats and give them things that they need. He can come back to Republicans, whatever suits his purposes. He's actually a very good con man, if you ask me.
Valir, is he a con man in your mind?
I'd go a lot further than that. I consider him a terrorist. He's not an American citizen, so what he's done isn't treason, but I think it's more terrorism. Certainly publishing secret State Department and Pentagon correspondence during wartime is a criminal act.
All right. Well, when he worked with Bradley Manning, now Chelsea Manning, to be really politically correct from my mouth, I like to say both names, Bradley Chelsea Manning, the he, she. All right. America knows about the transgendered Manning. When that happened, which was his first classified major dump, it wasn't Julian Assange that dumped it. Julian Assange provided the platform, and Bradley Manning went in on Hillary Clinton cables, which is very ironic because President Obama pardoned Manning, but he was the one, at the time it was a he went in and grabbed those cables and decided he was going to be a hero with regard to the war in the Middle East and was going to let the world see what the State Department, i.e. Hillary Clinton and President Obama, were doing at the time. And the platform that was available was WikiLeaks. So up until that time, Julian Assange was not looked at as a nefarious character. But then things started to turn. How dare you allow this to happen, Valir? But he was considered more of a loosely termed journalist, Valir.
Loosely termed. And it swings both ways. I mean, people like him for one thing and don't like him for another, but there's a difference between whistleblowing and treason, and he's just taken it too far.
Okay, well, how is that different, Lori, to you than what Matt Drudge does all day long and has been doing for some time, 20 years, 21 years, something like that? How is that different? Matt Drudge links to all kinds of things people can read. How is Julian Assange any different, Lori?
I really don't think he is all that different. And I remember several times when people thought Drudge was some kind of a treasonous terrorist because of the information he was releasing. Again, he has feeds to everybody. Well, so does Assange. Assange is basically like the router, if you will. So I don't really think of him. I think journalist is a loose term, but in a way he is, because he disseminates anything that's given to him at an appropriate time, much like Drudge does. Was the Chelsea Manning thing, I think that was probably the only recourse, the only place that she had to release that information was through Assange with his assistance. But I think many other people come to him as well for that same thing. So,
well, I remember the Republican conservatives were all over how great he was with regard to showing Hillary cables, which was not exactly what the State Department was promoting. And then when it came to the 2016 election, all of a sudden with all that Hillary stuff and possible Russia stuff, and we're learning over the years that it was Russian hackers, like the hacker of Bradley Manning. It's not Julian Assange that's hacking, although he did have an earlier history of being a good hacker. That's how he knows, I guess, other hackers. But Russia came in on 2016 to influence in our elections. And all of a sudden, that stuff from Podesta and Hillary wound up on WikiLeaks. My take is that he's very, very risky. He got emboldened with the power that his website provided, all of these hits, and thinks, well, if I'm just a platform, then I'm just a journo. I'm just a person that takes the information further. I don't do the hacking. It was Bradley Manning. It was Guccifer II, a Russian hacker. It was hackers in Poland that were working for the Russian government. It was these nasty emails from Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Hillary herself and all of the nefarious characters under Obama's FBI and in the DNC. Hillary herself, for example, loosely using her email privileges through the Department as Secretary of State, through the Department of State. So he acts like he washes his hands of it. That is not the way the current Secretary of State is seeing things. Mike Pompeo has connected with Ecuador. Ecuador is getting a little tired of 6 years of Julian Assange. His health has deteriorated quite a bit. He's thin. He's distraught. He needs some fresh air, some sunshine, some vitamin D, and he knows his time is up. Mike Pompeo says, hey, there is a charge. Didn't exactly say that, but didn't deny it when another reporter did show that there was a leak in another Russian file that showed Julian Assange's name. So most likely he has been charged, and most likely, in my guess, it is with espionage. The question now, Valir, is he is going to say, when extradited to the United States, which I think is going to be after the first of the year, probably in the first quarter of the year, he is going to say, help me out here. If I give you full pardon that it was Russia that was doing this, or full disclosure, will you pardon me? Do you think our State Department will drop any espionage charge on Julian Assange?
I don't know. It'll sure be interesting to watch it play out. And if Mueller goes after him, that'll raise my opinion of Mueller. I wish he'd go after Edward Snowden for stealing thousands of intelligence documents and sharing them with foreign journalists too.
Yes, to me, I think Snowden is more the culprit. When you're stealing things, when you've got your hand in where the originals are executed, and then you steal it and you hole up in South Korea and Thailand, and Julian Assange to me is a more controversial character. There's a side of me that is sympathetic towards him. He had a really bad childhood. There's a side to me that kind of feels sorry for him. He found his way in this new technology. And while he seems risk averse, to me, it's Edward Snowden is more nefarious than Julian Assange. On the espionage matter, Lori, what do you think?
I think that, honestly, I believe he's going to end up getting pardoned because they're going to want this Russian information. And again, he didn't hack the information. He took it and disseminated it. So I'm not so sure they're going, in this day and age and in this environment, I'm not sure that you're going to see espionage charges against him.
So you don't think he has been charged? Is that what you're saying?
I don't believe that it's going to be successful. I don't see it happen. I personally don't see it happening.
All right. That's more clear. I think he has been charged. Mm-hmm. I think the charge or charges, it could be plural. I think it's probably plural, is espionage and related crimes having to do with espionage. But I also agree with you, Lori, that he's got a very strong case. Mm-hmm. It's just that, in my view, if I was a prosecutor, I would say you pushed your luck, you knew better, and you're lucky that you got 6 years of life at the Ecuador embassy. You should embrace them and thank them, because otherwise you'd be in Sweden facing a trial. They dropped the charges there, or in the United States, and you got 6 years to live. He could go from that, what I call Tower of London in Ecuador, to Guantanamo Bay, Valir.
Yeah. And I think he should be afraid of that, because that's definite possibility.
I mean, he doesn't come out. He doesn't get vitamin D. He doesn't get good food. He doesn't get to walk around. It's like a Tower of London in the space we call Ecuador in London. All right. If he doesn't win a case, and I think a case is coming the first quarter of 2019, I think he will be looking ultimately at Guantanamo Bay. Very interesting to watch. Thank you, ladies. You're listening to Think America with Terry Gilberg. This is where we reason first and then converse. We let our hair down. There's no wrong answers here, but we do bring thought-provoking conversation starters to you every week. Find us on thinkamericaradio.com or on iTunes, wherever you download your podcasts. I'll be right back. Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilberg. Will driverless cars lead to more sex in cars? Well, you knew this was coming in spite of a new study that verifies it. They've done polling and looked at all of this. People will be eating, they say, and sleeping and having hanky-panky too. All these researchers that look at driverless cars, they say they will become more commonplace. It's our little hub, if you will. The driverless car will have roadside hotel functions. In other words, you throw out that sleeping bag and pretty soon you're sleeping in your car. It will serve as a restaurant pod as well. So it's not a big leap to think that it is kind of a mini home. And what you do in your bigger home, you can probably do in a car, including having relations. Valir, your thoughts on all this?
Terry, I think we'll all be dead or have greatly diminished sex drives before most of us can afford a driverless car.
Who are you talking about here? Speak for yourself.
It's cost prohibitive right now. So the only ones, the ones I've seen around town are public ones. The germaphobe in me shudders at the thought of having sex in a public driverless car. But I'm the person who rips the comforter off hotel beds and tries not to think about news reports that show black lights when I crawl into that bed. So having been in some pretty sketchy cabs, I'm not too keen on sex or even sleeping in a driverless car that I don't.
Those hotels and cabs are public, are utilized publicly. What about your own car? You can bring your own Windex in, Clorox if you'd like. Have you seen the Volvo one, Lori? The Volvo, there's a new Volvo out and it's
beautiful.
Sexy. It is sexy.
It is. It's beautiful.
What do you think?
I saw, and I was reading the articles and kind of studying this, and it covers every single thing except for a bathroom. There wasn't any facilities. I mean, you can get that in an RV. So until they figure that out, I don't think we're going to get to live in our cars quite yet. But it's an interesting thought. It really is.
As I study driverless cars, and of course, there's been these accidents and so forth, and it's sort of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And then as the accident fades from memory and the technology moves forward and there are these sleek designs and so forth, I always thought a driverless car would be so terrific if it could go in the air, like George Jetson, and not a little bug either, more of a mini home. And they could come in all kinds of sizes. If you didn't have a bunch of kids like you put in an SUV today, you could have this more sportier car that is in the air. And it could be anything and everything that you have in your home in the air. I think that is coming, including the bathroom, Lori.
Good.
Shower too.
That would be even better.
Valier.
I look forward to that day, that Jetsons day, but we're not there yet. So if it comes and I'm still mobile enough to enjoy it, then that'll be great.
I like this idea. I think technology will take us in this direction. I just want to be up in the air and dart around like a helicopter getting me places. It'd sure save a lot of time in traffic. Valier, I think the whole world of driverless cars, if we can get them up in the air, will be little mini homes that are mobile in the air. We're going to see homeschooling. We're going to see nap time. We're going to see family fights. We're going to see everything we have in the home and maybe in the backyard too, up in the air, because I don't think these little tiny driverless cars that look like a Volkswagen Bug, a la George Jetson style, are going to be that small. I think they'll be larger.
More like an RV.
Yeah. I mean, maybe put your boat in your car too and sail around the skies.
There's a lot of safety issues to work out, and that would add to air traffic. But if we can get there, it'll sure be fun to see.
What do you think, Lori?
I don't want an RV flying over my house, but I love the idea of maybe something a little bit smaller. This sounds like fun.
Well, the idea is to move people, and people come with stuff. They come with families. They come with beds, and they need hygiene products, including a shower. They need food. Who knows? There might even be a little kitchen in there, too. I see it more like an RV. I really do. That's it for this segment on Think America. Good discussion, ladies. We'll see. And as you referenced earlier, Valier, we may be dead. And I said, think for yourself. But I think by the time it gets in the air, we will all be dead. It's for another generation. Quick break. We'll be back on Think America with Terry Gilbert. Reason first, then converse. Find me on Facebook, Terry Talk Radio. Welcome back to Think America, where we reason first and then converse. I'm Terry Gilbert, delighted to have Sean Hammond with us. He is the GM of Aquarius Casino and Resort out in Nevada in Laughlin. And I'm anxious to talk to him about how employment in the gaming industry in general has given so many folks skills for a lifetime that they might not have received in other lines of work. Sean, hello and welcome to the program. Nice to have you.
Well, thanks for having me.
You bet. Let's talk first of all about gaming, your rise to the top in gaming, being a GM, and how employment opportunities are there for those who don't have certain skills, but that they can learn certain skills and rise in the gaming industry. Gaming industry employs millions of people all over the place, not just in the United States, in Europe as well, and so forth. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I can tell you that I've been in the gaming industry for 30 years now. I started when I was 21. There is definitely opportunity abound throughout the casino industry. I started originally as a cocktail waiter at the Riverside Resort in Laughlin and did that for about a year and a half before moving on to the slot department. And through opportunity and just hard work, rose up through the ranks. And when there was a position open, whether it was management or whatnot, I would raise my hand and say, I could do that. And went basically all the way up to GM. I've been a GM now at the Aquarius Casino Resort for 7 years, been at this property for 12 years. And previous to that was at the Ramada Express for about 17 years and held several different positions.
You know, sometimes the gaming industry, casino industry in general gets a bad rap, but it employs so many people and it offers so many opportunities for people like yourself to grow, other people to grow. I think it's very good. In fact, I was looking at a spreadsheet of everything that your casino does in the community for charities and so forth. So it does a work outside, good work outside of just the employment avenue as well.
Absolutely. The casino industry is a career field for many people. Even looking at the Las Vegas area, you've got, cocktail waitresses or valet attendants that make upwards of $75,000 to $100,000 a year. And that's really good pay and the ability to, buy a house and take care of your family. I myself own my own home and a couple of rental homes, and I have property in Mojave County. So I've been able to do all that because of the fact of working for the casino industry.
Did you find your rise pretty quick? Is the average person able to rise the way you did? It sounds like you had good bosses. It sounds like you struck when opportunity presented itself. It sounds like you were an eager beaver. You were hardworking. You were there on the job. You were earnest about graduating to the next level of business. Is the average worker like you?
I think my story is probably a little unique. If you would have asked me at 21, did I think I was going to be a general manager of a casino, I would have said no way. But the opportunity is still there for many, whether it's going to the general manager level or a vice president or a corporate level. I have had great bosses in my background, one particularly at Ramada Express, and she really pushed me into areas that I was not originally comfortable with, and that was into the marketing department, and we still laugh about it to this day because I thought marketing people were crazy and I didn't want to have anything to do with marketing. So I ended up going and about a year into the position, I just became crazy and then fell in love with it, and then things just happened from there.
Well, you learn about food and beverage. You learn about hospitality. You learn about the art of money and making money for the casino when also the customer has to be served with coin in his pocket when he leaves at the end of the night. You learn about security and safety. I'm reminded of the Mandalay Massacre, of course, and I am sure your casino and resort has done all kinds of steps to avoid something like that. You also learn about how to handle people. You learn about the gaming addict. There are those, and how to spot them so that they don't get deeper and deeper into their addiction. Tell me a little bit more about this whole world of gaming from a manager's point of view and all the things you've had to learn and understand and then manage.
Well, believe it or not, from a management perspective, it's all about relationships. We have relationships with our guests and we have relationships with our team members. And gambling is entertainment. It's supposed to be for fun. And, there is about 2 to 3% of gamblers that are addicted. We do have programs in place that we can offer them assistance and also get them on it's called a barred patrons list, where we stop mailing to them and stop inviting them. And that's kind of a self-reporting status. It's a lot different than, seeing somebody that is drunk or on drugs by their behavior. You can't really, look at a gambler and say that one's an addict and this one's not an addict. So we do have brochures on the casino floor and in place to help people when they notify us that there is a problem.
And with your expertise, can you spot a gambling addict? Do you have a nose for that, an eye for that, an ear for that?
Not really. It's really hard to define. We're pretty tight on our check cashing policy and our credit or marker issuing. So if there's a problem, that's usually where it first pops up. But then our tight controls and staying on top of that, we can back somebody down, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Let's segue into what your company is doing with regard to security and safety since the horrific Mandalay massacre in Nevada, Las Vegas, Nevada.
We immediately added more staffing. And then the other policy that we changed, and we did it company-wide, was before, when you put a do not disturb sign on a room, we would not go into that guest room. And now those rooms are checked every 24 hours. And that was a part of the problem with the Mandalay Bay incident. I believe he was in there for 5 or 6 nights, and nobody had accessed the room the whole time.
Right. But he did get room service outside, just being left there. So he would, from my understanding, look through the peephole and then bring the tray in, correct?
That is correct. And that would be unusual for us if we were to do room service and there was odd behavior like that. Typically for room service, they enter in the room and they set everything up. So.
Right. And then how are you adding more cameras? How are you, I guess, walking the tightrope between being very user friendly? Everybody come in. It's all about relationships, spend a lot of money, but don't go overboard, of course, with drinking and addiction, because that's a tightrope. That's a balancing act. And yet watching them so that another slaughter doesn't occur. That is a heavy lift, I would think, for a manager, and very challenging. Not that you're not up to the challenge, but nonetheless, in today's world, that you're to be extolled if you can manage that and balance that.
Absolutely. And everyone's pretty much on guard nowadays. If you see something, say something. If something looks a little bit odd, we had a situation once where a gentleman was doing gun class over on the Arizona side in Bullhead City, and he literally had brought rifles in and pulled them out of his trunk in the parking garage and wrapped them in a blanket. Mm-hmm. Well, a guest saw this gentleman doing that and immediately came to security. Well, security called surveillance, and we were on the gentleman the minute he hit the door. So it's just a matter of everybody staying focused and being aware. And when something looks a little bit odd, you just pass it up the chain of command. Wrap
it up for us on the best news about the gaming industry going forward.
There's always jobs available, even with, the unemployment being so low. We still have plenty of jobs that are available, and you can literally start at the bottom and work your way up to the top. There's just a variety of opportunity with the casino industry.
Well, you should know you've done it. He is Sean Hammond. He is the GM of Aquarius Casino in Laughlin, Nevada, coming from the bottom, working his way all the way to the top. I applaud you for that. You want to leave a website for folks to go to find out more about Aquarius Casino and Resort?
Absolutely. Our website is aquariuscasinoresort.com, or you can also find us too on visitlaughlin.com.
Thanks for sharing your world in the gaming industry. We appreciate you, Sean.
Thank you very much.
You're listening to Think America with Terry Gilbert. There's a new expression being used in social media, and it goes like this: Do you want to have gender with me? You might say, what in the heck does that mean? On the social network site Tumblr lists 112 genders thus far this year. So I guess one could say they're keeping track of all these genders, whereby people can have gender with each other. And it's not just lovemaking, it's relationship in, well, what might be deemed for most of us odd ways. Having gender is apparently exploring the varieties, the degrees of masculinity and femininity, and defining new relationships and making them more prominent, creating these new relationships, making them prominent in ways they've never been prominent before or even known before. This expression may take hold as more genders are defined and relationships are then explored with these new definitions of gender. Lori, do you want to have gender with me?
I know what I am, but after studying this, now I'm confused because I'm not sure what I want to identify as today. So it's an interesting concept. Yeah, it kind of flies in the face of biology and genetics, all that good kind of stuff. But in this day and age, I guess you can self-identify and recreate yourself on a daily basis, and it's okay.
I think when Tumblr throws this out and I go into the chat boxes, Valir, and see what people are saying, the one word I come away with is being creative. Mm-hmm. For example, there was a thread where a male said that he was about 70% female, but that he's not gay and he's not going to have a sex change, but that he does wear female clothing. I looked at this and said, well, this male, a biological male, identifies as a woman, at least in clothing. And I would have said he is a transvestite or manifest behavior of being a transvestite, at least on this thread. That's what I came away with. It's a way to be creative. It's a way to play act with the two genders, biological genders. And that's what I think is happening on Tumblr in these chat rooms. And so when people say, well, do you want to gender with me? It's, well, I'm a man with the appropriate masculine paraphernalia and genitalia, and I'm in a tutu skirt and pigtails, and I wear bows in my hair, and I wear ballet flats, but I am not gay. So it's all kinds of variations. That's what I got from this.
You know, Terry, if you look at some of the different genders on that list, most of them, many of them, are not really about gender at all. They're about feelings. I'll give you a couple of examples. There are astral genders who feel connected to space, and kale genders who share qualities with outer space. That sounds more like science fiction nerdism than a gender. A lot of these genders are feeling based and not rooted in any actual science. There's another one, magigender. That's a gender that is mostly gender and the rest is something else. What else is there?
Well, did you notice you're using gender as a noun? The question I posed was as a verb. See, right. In the threads that I've gone to, not that there's anything wrong with that, the threads that I went to talk about holding on to your biological stuff, what you're born with, but in the verb sense, playing at the discovery of different personalities, different relationships, different variety within two genders. Although I am with you, Tumblr does define 112 genders as in the noun, Lori.
It's interesting. And it's, and I'm almost wondering too, since these folks aren't really meeting each other, everything's online, you have this whole, it's like a second type of relationships. So you have man, woman, whatever. But now you've got these kind of ethereal things where I can be whatever I want to be today, and you can be who you want to be, and we'll just play at that. And then tomorrow we can all be somebody else. So it's almost like they're reaching out and just kind of creating a whole new whole new class of people, if you will.
Maybe I can summarize it by saying it's pretty fanciful. It's very creative, but is it real? And I don't know how you live reality with all of these different ways that you change on a dime. But it's good creativity, I suppose, maybe for movies and plays, but I don't know how you live in that reality. We will see what Megan has to say. Megan Porth will be with us, and she will chime in on whether or not anyone wants to gender with her. I'm Terry Gilbert with Valir and Lori from California and from Illinois. Megan Porth joins us now on Think America. She's a contributor to the show at this time. We've been talking about this new expression, do you want to gender with me? The idea, Megan, if you're a little unfamiliar with it, is that people can have gender with each other, meaning not just lovemaking, but relationship making and kind of exploring different degrees of masculinity and femininity and creating a new relationships.
I think it's a substitute for the word sex, actually. And I think that it's kind of a play on this whole idea that gender is the same as sex and sex is the same as gender. Then people are saying, okay, well, then do you want to have gender with me? I don't have a problem with people actually expressing themselves in different ways. And as a little girl who is very much a tomboy, and I was called a boy all the time, I actually kind of like the idea of being able to have this kind of fluidity in gender. I'm probably very typical cis female gender. Myself in the way that I present myself. And I by no means am an expert on this. I actually kind of like it, Terry, just simply because the way that we express ourselves and the way that we are categorized in society is fairly arbitrary. So each and every person should be able to say, yeah, I'm fluid. I'm cisgender. I am gender binary. I'm non-binary. However they want to say it. The one issue that I do get concerned about is just simply the fact that some people get really offended when you mislabel them. And I see this a lot, even in my oldest daughter goes to a high school. It's an art school. It's really cool. But the only problem is that the kids are getting offended when you're not labeling them properly, or when you're saying he's a young man, she's a young woman. And they say, well, you're that's offensive. That's a microaggression, right? That's how you're harming me. And that's the only thing I don't like about it. I actually have no problem with people expressing themselves the way that they want to. In fact, that's probably part of the libertarian creed, is that each and every person gets to determine their path and nobody from the outside gets to tell them how they express themselves. The one thing that does concern me, though, is that there's a degree of victimhood. If you're mislabeling somebody, it's seen as an offense against that person. And I don't like that that's being perpetuated amongst young teenagers. Now, the good news is they're teenagers. They're probably going to grow out of this and they're going to start moving forward on some of these other things that are more important to them. But yeah, if you want to have gender with me, you want to have sex with me, I guess it's going to end up being the same thing, because the truth is that gender, even in the way that it's defined traditionally, whether it's male and female, that's not even accurate in and of itself, Terry. And that's what science is talking to us about, that there's entire subsects of people who are actually have either both gender, micro or macro. So the truth is it's not as easily defined. And that's what I like, is that the conversation is happening.
Well, as I said in the previous segment, it is, if nothing else, creative. What do you got in Change Your Life Technology as we wrap up this edition of Think America with Terry Gilbert? Reason first, then converse. Go.
Some really exciting stuff about Alzheimer's treatment. As you know, Terry, Alzheimer's is not only becoming more of an issue as we have our population aging, but also they don't know what to do. They're really lost on this. Neuroscience is really lacking. And part of the problem is, Terry, is that the brain has such a great self-defense mechanism. It has a blood-brain barrier. And that protects it from any kind of outside pathogens, but it also stops outside treatment from getting in to treat any kind of brain disease. So as you know, Alzheimer is brought on by plaque. which are clusters of proteins that accumulate and then they block the brain's connectivity. Well, the problem that these scientists are having is that they might have some solutions, but they can't get past the blood-brain barrier, except for now. They're utilizing ultrasounds, actually. And some of the researchers at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center in Toronto were actually able to utilize ultrasounds to open up the blood-brain barrier. And they were able to, then they're thinking that maybe they can come in later with treatments like chemotherapy, medications, antibodies, immune system cells, immunotherapy, stem cells, all kinds of different treatments. But they have to get back past that brain-blood barrier, which they haven't been able to do before.
It's interesting that you're talking about this. I last month went to a lecture on women's health, and this was addressed specifically for women's health and how the new science is looking at estrogens from, of course, the ovaries and uterine area, and how because it's fatty, they think women postmenopausal on estrogens are saved somewhat from Alzheimer's because, in fact, those estrogens being fatty can get through the blood-brain barrier. I was astonished and very, very thankful I went to that lecture.
No kidding. That's fascinating.
I'll tell you more off the air. We need to wrap right now. Thank you very much, Megan. That's good news about Alzheimer's. Find Megan at yourcontractshop.com, sponsor of the show. Thank you to Valir. Thank you to Lori. To all of our listening audience, we are Think America Radio. Find our podcast at thinkamericaradio.com, iTunes, or anywhere you download podcasts. Find me at Terry Talk Radio on Facebook. And remember, reason first and then converse. See you next time. Does it surprise you that the Obamas couldn't conceive naturally, but instead used IVF? We'll talk about it on the program today. Are women in general more ashamed of affairs that they've had when those affairs go public, the news of it? We'll talk about that as well. Congresswoman-elect Ocasio-Cortez can't seem to find an affordable apartment in D.C. What's up with that? Hello there, Terry here on Think America, where we reason first and then converse. I'm Terry Gilberg. This is America's radio town hall. I invite every week real Americans, non-broadcasters, to come to the microphone from across the land, and they come in and discuss, let their hair down with me on thought-provoking conversation starters on all kinds of things, many that you don't see in the headlines. This week is no different. Valir is with us. She is a small business owner of a PR company. Valir, welcome to the program. Nice to have you.
Thanks for having me, Terry.
Well, I know you're ready to go. I can tell with the energy in your voice. Lori is also with us. Lori does fraud investigation for white-collar crime, particularly in the insurance industry. Hello, Lori. Nice to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
All right, let's get right to it, ladies. This first question that I have for you has to do with what I just teased on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She now is complaining. Remember, she is now a congresswoman elect from a district in New York. She's complaining that she can't find an affordable apartment in Washington until she makes money from her new job as a congresswoman after she is officially sworn in. Of course, that doesn't really begin now for, 2.5 months or so, the end of January when things get rolling. And as predicted, she said she would reach out. She has asked friends and, of course, family for some financial help, particularly students at American University there in D.C. And they've wanted to accommodate her until some of the more savvy ones say, whoa, wait a minute. You make a chunk load of change. As a matter of fact, counting your congresswoman's salary to be plus another $6,200 salary from your campaign, you're upwards $174,000 a year. Get your own apartment. And she's kind of whining and complaining and rubbing her eyes with a few tears in her voice that she can't afford that. Valir, I'll start with you. Does she have rocks in her head?
Absolutely. In a time when so many Americans are living on much less than $170,000 a year, and they're struggling to keep the one home they have, I think it's outrageous to suggest taxpayers should foot the bill for legislators to have two homes. I mean, why can't they just rent out in their home state their houses or apartments as an Airbnb while Congress is in session? Or why don't they get a roommate in D.C. to help split the costs? I think frugality needs to start at the top. And, some people say we might get better legislators if we paid them more, but I think you just have more than running to live on the dole. So I think our founding fathers must be rolling in their graves over this.
Well, I find 174,000 a big chunk of change, but then you have to factor in, Valir, an apartment average one bedroom in the Beltway, I'm told, is anywhere between $2,000 to $2,700 a month. Still, she's single, and that still leaves a fair amount of money to live on. So it sounds to me that she's kind of crying in her beer, and because she's sort of socialistic in nature, want others to come to help her out, sort of spreading their wealth around back to hers, Lori.
I totally agree with you. I think it's kind of fun because the students are getting a real lesson in capitalism and giving back and all this stuff. And they're actually questioning, why are we going to put somebody on the dole when they make, 3 times what the family makes? So I think that's kind of it's going to be a good lesson for the students. But as far as, paying to play, if we pay these legislators more, I can't see the point to that at all. These folks are coming in, they have businesses, they've got private practices. These are business people first and foremost, and they represent some states with very varying levels of economy. So how can you set a living wage for someone, say, from California, a legislator from California, as opposed to someone from like Idaho or North Dakota or something like that? How would you even determine what a proper wage would be? That's not something we do. So I think she's crying in her beer. I think if she can't grow up and be an adult, she needs to leave the hill and go back to kindergarten.
There's a few elements here that maybe I should review for our listening audience. One of the elements is she has in the past claimed surprise at how expensive it is in Washington, D.C. And my take on that is tough bananas. You're running, you assume in running that you're going to win. If not, why are you running? Now you've won and you didn't know this. Where have you been? Where has your campaign manager been? Where has your the momentum in your campaign? Has no one ever pulled you aside and said, this is what it is? So let's do a little bit of the math. If an income tax of 30%, if we throw that number out, her salary drops from $168,000, which is the congressional salary, to about $117,000. That leaves her about $9,800 a month. If an average bedroom, let's say on the low side, is $2,000, average one bedroom, that leaves her about $7,800 a month to live on. Now, she's not married. She doesn't have kids. I don't think she is paying for a house in New York City, right? That she would have to split all of that. So that does seem for her something that's quite affordable. Again, I go back to, well, when you really do the math, these American university students are on to you and they don't like it. And this sounds like, once again, living off their money to help her because she wants to live inside the Beltway in a kind of highfalutin way. So let's just review some of this. There are other congresspeople, to Lori's point, that sleep in their offices because they've got a home in Montana or they've got a home in Southern California and they can't afford both. What about this, Valir? What if by winning a seat in Congress, there was some, and this is hypothetical, some kind of dorms that are upscale or townhouses or some kind of row houses where all Congress has to live, and you rent that, and that's where you have to be simple, elegant, but affordable. You have to live there because Lord knows you might be out in 2 years. What if that was more the case and you know going into it, that's where you have to live?
Well, why does it have to be elegant or upscale? I mean, these are people who work for we the people. You know, why do we need to fund any lavish lifestyle?
Well, I said that when I said dorms, because people, now that we're talking about American University, people might think a college dorm. I'm saying nice, very, very practical, elegant, and that's a relative degree, but it's not slumming. You know, it would work for the salary that is being offered, but they all have to live there.
Sure. Actually, if you've been in dorms lately, they're very nice. You know, nicer than, again, many Americans, how they live. But, you know, something simple, or like I said earlier, if they live together, you know, have roommates to help defray the costs. I just don't understand the expectation that the taxpayers are going to, you know, are expected to provide them with the lifestyle they're accustomed to.
Lori, what about this idea? What if they had to live in some kind of nice, if you don't like the word elegant, and that's relative, but nice, affordable place, but that rent had to be paid by the campaign?
I like it. I like that idea because it will actually circle back as to how campaigns and how money is actually being used. So I think that's a great idea. And to your point, you know, a lot of executives live in very nice apartment complexes and things, even here, you know, in different areas placed by Intel and different corporations. They do it all the time for their senior folks. They're very nice, they're affordable, and it solves, you know, it solves a problem.
Well, when we have Capitol Hill, maybe we can have Congressperson Hill, and it's an area of D.C., and I keep coming back to sort of an idea of a row house or an area that is, you know, when you walk on a private campus, for example, in a university, there's sort of the professors live over there on the hill or down more toward the valley. It's where they all convene. And then they can kibitz and they can have their little coffee talk off hours. And maybe they can try to get along a little bit better because they're all in that one spot. So on the weekends, maybe they can have a couple of margaritas and try to solve the problems of the world before going back and fighting on Monday or Tuesday when they come back from the weekend. You know, Sandra Day O'Connor had this idea long time ago when she was in the legislature, long time ago in the state of Arizona. And she would invite people over to her home to sort of talk about the problems before the legislature would come back on the Monday and the Tuesday and the Wednesday when there would be this more tension in the halls of the legislature. So I don't think it's a bad idea. Back to the math, though, I still think, Valir, $174,000 is a lot of money for a first-time freshman congresswoman to be complaining about.
Yeah. I mean, there's people in D.C. who live on a lot less. You know, the cost of living is higher there, but they're managing their money and managing to do it on significantly less.
Do you think she is just ignorant about all of this and hasn't really done her homework enough, Valir?
I think that's part of it. I think part of it, too, is maybe a sense of entitlement. Like you mentioned, she's a socialist and just not understanding how the real world works.
Mm-hmm. Lori, we're down to about, a minute or so. What is your take on that? Why is she crying in her beer after all?
Because I think for all of her stated educational background, I don't think she has a clue about how anything actually functions normally. I would bet she acts surprised when she has to pay rent every month, if indeed she does. She seems very closeted, very opinionated as to what she's been taught. But I think that she has no clue how the real world actually behaves or acts.
She's going to get back there and she's going to realize that there's a lot of seasoned Congress people, that she's not necessarily the queen of the block. Some of her ideas might get cut down to size. I'm sure at this point she's already probably zoning in on an apartment. And this story will leave quickly after Christmas. You're listening to Think America with Terry Gilberg, where we reason first and then converse. This is America's Radio Town Hall. Stick around. We'll talk about whether or not you knew that the Obamas used IVF to conceive their 2 daughters. Wow. There's a surprise. We'll get to it next. Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilbert. You can find me on Facebook, Terry Talk Radio, and certainly subscribe to our podcast. You can find that on the tab at thinkamericaradio.com. Don't miss any of our shows. I want to turn now to whether or not, ladies, it surprises you that the Obamas couldn't conceive naturally. I did not know this. In Michelle Obama's new book, she opens up about miscarriage and how at the age of 33 to 34, they decided that their only path to have children was to use in vitro fertilization, IVF. Clearly, that worked for them. Malia is 20, Sasha is 17, alive and healthy, and great kids. But they had to go down this path. Here's my take on all of this. I was surprised to learn this because this is a family that has been very famous for keeping details of their personal life quite private. And now it seems that this is, shall I say, a trump card to play a little bit for publicity to sell this book. And it's working. So it's clearly a book promotion. The idea that by the time you're mid-30s, it's over for you is just not true for many Americans. I'm not saying that many American women. I'm not saying this isn't true for Michelle Obama because she had a miscarriage. I had a miscarriage just for the sake of argument, and I conceived afterwards. 33, 34 is still within child producing years to have normal children. You don't have to worry about issues with spina bifida or Downs. So I find this a little bit of a stretch, but more to the point, how every round of in vitro fertilization starts at about $12,000 a round. Then it's $6,000 to $7,000 for the meds. Americans are saying, you got to be kidding. We are not doing this. We're just going to try the old-fashioned way, the fun way, and the inexpensive way, Lori.
In this case, for the Obamas, they were subsidized. Illinois has a law that healthcare providers must provide in vitro fertilization or alternative methods to conception. So in the Obamas case, I'm not sure how much they actually had to pay since they were subsidized, since these procedures were actually subsidized.
But even still, if this is the way that they chose, I don't know that the Obamas at the time before the presidency couldn't have afforded it. She was a hospital executive, and from every piece of literature I've ever read on Michelle Obama, she was making at least $300,000 a year, not to mention what he was making. Valir, how do you see this whole thing? I think it's a bit of a way of a publicity thing, to a stunt, if you will, to get out. Buy my book. You can learn more. And I'm annoyed by the fact that at 33 and 34, I can't have kids because I have a miscarriage. I know women who have had kids at 42.
I work in public relations, so clearly this is a ploy to sell books. It's not a shocking revelation. I really think it's kind of a nothing burger. It's not really any of our business, and they had no obligation to tell us how their children were conceived. But as far as choosing to do IVF at a relatively young age. In my book, that's their business. And if they can afford it, more power to them. The problem I have is that, unfortunately, it's an option that's open to fewer people today, thanks to rising costs under Obamacare. I would love to see the media press Michelle on that, or perhaps see her donate a portion of her book advance to fertility research. But we both know neither of those is going to happen. In Sweden, and they do cover in vitro fertilization in their national health benefit package, they only do that up until the age of 40 because, as we all know, pregnancy and delivery rates drop after 40. So there is that window in the mid 30s to 40 where it's your optimal time. So I don't fault them for turning to that.
I don't fault anybody for turning to that per se. What struck me is, why did they not let America know this earlier, Lori?
I don't think there was really a reason or an opportunity. Probably opportunity is a wrong word, but I don't think there was ever a reason for them to bring it up. And I think more to the point of her selling a book or whatever, I think that's probably why she brought it up now. But if you look at the entire time of his presidency, there really wasn't a whole lot of talk about babies or healthcare when it came to in vitro, et cetera. So I think this is just a hook really to help her sell that book. This was a perfect time. She could trot it out, and it's helping her.
And I think it's helping now. I was reading in an online publication that there's a stigma about this. I don't know that that's so true. Oh, what is the stigma? Is the stigma that you can't do it naturally because something's wrong? Well, okay. But then when she puts this in a book and they're so progressive and look at what we did, I think that stigma washes away for this promotion. Look at, we're very progressive and this is what we can do. And look at what science has offered us, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, the book is out. You can read more on it. And that's our take for today on Think America Radio. We'll be back with my interview with an expert on the fire situation in California. ThinkAmericaRadio.com. Subscribe to our podcast. I'm Terry Gilbert. You're listening to Think America with Terry Gilbert, where we reason first and then converse. I'm very happy to have Dr. Bonner Cohen on the program with us to talk about the wildfires in California, something the nation is talking about. Everybody seems to be talking about it. He is a senior fellow at the National Center for Public Policy Research and formerly with CEI Competitive Enterprise Institute. As we know, California seems to now be recovering from the wildfires. More and more lives. We're getting a tally. It's now up to, I believe the count is 65 dead, personal property destroyed. It's very important to realize, though, what Bonner has said, that there are grave mistakes that have contributed to these catastrophic conditions. It's not simply climate change. Dr. Cohen, welcome to the program. So nice to have you. We want to hear your expertise. It is the difference between climate deniers, they're bad, and those who keep the forest unkept, they're bad. So that's the conflict. Which is right?
The irony of California Governor Jerry Brown's recent comment that climate deniers are in some way responsible for the tragedy unfolding in California is that California's climate is doing exactly what one should expect California's climate to do. California has a dry, arid climate, low humidity, with very strong winds. Santa Ana winds in the south, Diablo winds in the north. It is in parts of it heavily forested. Others have grasslands. And when a fire breaks out there in that climate, which has not changed, it's been that way for thousands and thousands of years, there is the potential for wildfire. The real question here is, what have California public officials, and to a lesser extent federal officials, done to limit the damage that they know will come? Because given how prone that particular state is to wildfires. And this is where we can only say that California has catastrophically mismanaged its natural resources. It has made it extremely difficult to remove dead and diseased trees from forests on both public and private land. And if you don't remove those trees and the surrounding underbrush, when a fire either breaks out in the forest or nearby and spreads to the forest, you have transformed a forest into a tinderbox. Mm-hmm. Things go up in smoke quickly. They may start off in grasses and chaparral, but sooner or later they will reach forest. Have they built adequate fire breaks in those forests? Answer, no. Have they removed enough dead and diseased trees to limit the damage once the fire starts? Answer, no. Do they allow for prescribed burns? So as to clear out some of the underbrush, which is actually a practice that's very common on private land. Tree farmers do it all the time. Have they done that? No. Result, you have a disaster in the making.
I used to live in California, both northern and southern, and I don't remember up until maybe the last 15 years, 20 years, having wildfires be so cyclical. It's so commonplace now, Bonner. It's sort of like, well, this is how it is in California. It's our culture. And we just wait for the rains to pat it all down and put these fires out, or we wait for federal money to come and help us. It's like the whole state, but the people in the state, they know what you're talking about. They know what they need to do, but they would prefer to be tree huggers. And I don't remember that prior to maybe 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago.
Your reference to 20, 25 years goes right on the money, because a lot of California's problems began in the 1990s during the Clinton administration, whose forest policy was to promote so-called roadless areas, meaning no roads were to be built into forest to help firefighters put out fires once they had started. They reduced the amount of trees that could be removed from the forest, even dead and diseased trees. They had policies to block prescribed burns, fire breaks, and things like that. They already had a bad problem there. But when you have policies in place that simply make a bad situation worse and provide precious little protection for the people living in and near these fire-prone areas, you are flirting with disaster. Just look at the human loss of life that has happened this year. Actually, the latest figure I saw was 77 people dead, still close to 1,000 missing. In addition to which, the environment, the very things that the Governor Brown and the environmentalists would have you believe they want to protect, the environment has been destroyed hideously with tremendous loss of wildlife, and, by the way, absolutely unbreathable air. I just got off the phone with a radio station in Sacramento, California, and the host of that program told how absolutely unbreathable the air out there is. It is filthy. And this is what happens when you mismanage your natural resources, and when you manage natural resources not according to how nature really operates and what we can do to restrict some of the worst things, but when you endorse tree-hugging environmentalism, which is in itself completely at odds with nature and helps create conditions that lead to one catastrophe after another. I have a feeling that 1 year from now, I'll be back on this show, and we will be talking about the next disaster that is going to come unless and until policies are adopted in California that show the promise of finally coming to terms with the environment that they have and how better to manage it.
Well, as they're getting rains this week, their next natural disaster caused by the rain that's coming down is going to be these mudslides. I can only imagine what Malibu is thinking right now, those people that insist on living in Malibu when you've got these wildfires. But that's neither here nor there. That is what they're faced with right now. Here's my next question, Bonner. When will this mindset, this mentality change? Does it take more wildfires every single year so that the folks go, this is bananas, this is BS. We don't believe it's climate change. We believe it's our own doing because we don't create meadows. Logging industry is gone. We don't clean up all this debris. It's just kindling for more. And we're going to rebel, so to speak, in Sacramento and say enough is enough, Jerry Brown and all the rest. When will this change? Or is the state of California so ideologically connected with climate change and tree huggers and all the rest that they'll never change? Your view?
My view is if they don't change, they're going to make a bad situation far worse than it is now. I noted this morning in a news report I read that Governor Brown has said, maybe we should start allowing a bit more logging in California. Now, the man is 80 years old. How long has it taken him to finally realize that mismanaging the state's natural resources, and in this case the forest, are having the very predictable consequences that we're seeing today? Now, Mr. Brown's going to be leaving office in a few weeks, and he's going to have a successor, Gavin Newsom. Has he learned anything from this? His public statements tell us no, absolutely not. As long as a tree-hugging mentality and all the money that's behind it, think of Tom Steyer in San Francisco and the lavish funding.
Exactly. We need to leave it there, Bonner. I apologize. We're down on the clock. Bonner Cohen, Dr. Bonner Cohen, you can find him at the National Center for Public Policy Research. I will have you back in a year, and we will see if they've cleaned up any of this debris and kindling. If not, they've got to live with it until they learn the hard way. Right, Bonner?
That's exactly right.
All right. We appreciate you coming on the program. You're listening to Think America with Terry Gilbert. Thank you for listening to Think America Radio with Terry Gilbert, thought-provoking conversation starters. Find us thinkamericaradio.com. If you're on iTunes, go ahead and download our podcast there or on our website. Let's switch gears. Valir and Lori, are women in general more ashamed of affairs that they've had when those affairs go public? I'm reminded of Monica Lewinsky. She's still suffering from her affair with President Clinton. She still seems to be biting her nails over it. And while she has grown up and I'm sure gotten therapy over it, at one point she said she was suicidal until she saw a psychiatrist. There has been over the years not too much growth on the part of, I guess, the public to say, hey, women have affairs, men have affairs. Why do men get a pass and women still are shamed? The public isn't interested much in Bill Clinton's shame, for example, if he has any or ever had any. But still, oh, Monica, she's the one. She's the nasty woman. In other words, the woman that did the naughty. Whereas Bill Clinton was the adult in the room. So, Valir, why do we have this when women have busted through the glass ceiling for years and years now, but they can't seem to be on a par with men when it comes to affairs? Valir.
Terry, do we want to be on par with men when it comes to affairs? do we want affairs to be socially acceptable? I think that perhaps the solution isn't removing shame from women, but putting more shame on men. I'm not comfortable with, women want to be on par, having affairs is okay. It's not okay. And I think we need to get back to where, there's more pressure put on people and less tolerance of that kind of behavior across the board.
So because you're saying it takes two to tango, and we all know that, or maybe I'm saying it takes two to tango, when it comes to the shame, women still absorb the shame, carry the shame on their shoulders, are still ashamed, but men aren't. And you're saying to equal the playing field, men should feel that shame. After all, it takes two to tango. Is that it?
That's in part, yeah. But I don't think the solution is, let's let women and men off the hook. Let's just not have affairs. Let's not glorify them. Let's not, I don't know about shame, but let's just not, we're moving in the wrong direction.
I think what you're saying is, even though A&E has a big documentary still on Monica Lewinsky, I think what Valir is maybe suggesting, Lori, is why do this documentary? Let it go. Why glorify it? Why magnify it? Why have a documentary movie about it? Why still talk about it, Lori?
No, I totally agree. There's really no point to keep bringing it up other than just pure interest based upon all those things that are happening with the hashtag movements, etc. But why are we glorifying something that was a tragedy, actually? I don't understand it, and I don't agree with it.
Well, they glorify it because you can make money. After all, if they can talk about Monica Lewinsky and her shame and how she was more at fault, she's the nasty woman. She's the one that lured the president. She's the one that should have known better. After all, she was an adult by age. You're 18 and you're an adult. And that Bill Clinton gets a pass and they can make money on it, Lori, then they're going to continue at it. I think what Valir's point is that you want an equal playing field. Shame the men the way women have been shamed.
Yes. And that's something also, another corollary to this is how for so many years Democrats have, and they still are, turning a blind eye to Clinton's behavior and certainly other people up on Capitol Hill because they agree with their policies. So even after a year of the Me Too movement, very little is being said about his inappropriate, horrifying behavior, not only to Monica, but also to Juanita Broaddrick, Paula Jones, and many other women.
The hypocrisy is thick and deep. 30 seconds, Lori, do you agree?
I totally agree, and let's move it forward. Let's look at Cory Booker. Let's look at all the other new age Democrats that are pulling the same thing, and nothing's being said about them. It's okay for them. It's not okay for little women.
Well, then maybe it's all in the marketing, and the people on the right and conservative Republicans need to get marketing out there better so that the playing field is leveled. Good conversation, ladies. We'll be back and hear what Megan has to say. Megan is an attorney and a millennial, as you know, and libertarian in her views. We'll get her point of view right after this. Think America, thinkamericaradio.com. Subscribe to our podcast there or on iTunes or any spot where you go for downloading your podcast. We're there. I'm Terry Gilbert. We're back with Megan Porth. Megan is a contributor on Think America. She is with us. Women in general, are they more ashamed of affairs that they have had when those affairs go public, whereas men kind of go, hey, whatever, as is the case of Bill Clinton, who hardly threw an apology out there even after all these years, and Monica Lewinsky, who has shouldered the burden of her pain and at one point was suicidal over it until she got a psychiatrist. Now she's tried to reinvent herself with other things, and she still is shamed for this. Do you think it's important that women get on an equal playing field with men when they have after all, it takes two to tango?
Oh, definitely. And this is one of the things that is exciting about the feminist revolution, as far as I'm concerned, and where I think we're going to start seeing a little more movement is in the bedroom, Terry. I think that we're going to have a sexual revolution soon where we say, wait a second, men and women are treated differently depending upon how the public perceives our activities, if you will. I'm trying to keep it very PG here, Terry. But
we've had a sex revolution. It was called the 60s. It was called burn the bra. It was called the pill.
Right. Well, that was one aspect of it. There's so much more. I remember so vividly. I was a really young child when Monica Lewinsky, this scandal came out. And I remember so vividly how he was applauded as being this playboy. The image of the president was very, very different than the image that was portrayed of Monica Lewinsky. She was seen as being this naive, trashy. They called her nutty and slutty. They called her all kinds of names. I was a child watching these things happen. It was everything from the news to feminist writers to Saturday Night Live. And yet the president was seen very, very differently. And I see this still today. It's very different the way that fathers speak to their daughters, right? There's this joke about, every time a young man, if you have a beautiful daughter, they'll always say to the father, well, you better get that shotgun ready. But they aren't saying that about their sons. Again, the image is different. There's a chastity. There is a chasteness that is desirable amongst young women. And that is where I think we're going to see a revolution where we get to say, not only do we get to enjoy sex, Terry, but we get to define how we enjoy it. And we get to actually talk about it. The idea of a female orgasm is so elusive that even scientists don't totally understand it because it hasn't been studied, Terry. So that's where we're going to see this next sexual revolution.
Back to the social norms in the previous segment with Terry's talkers, there was discussion with the two talkers of Valir and Lori that affairs are not to be extolled, but when they happen, if the woman is shamed, then maybe there needs to be more shame on the man. And that will be the way to level the playing field.
Well, and I'm actually not a huge proponent for shame. I think that causes a lot of issues in society. People start acting very, very poorly when they feel shame. But I do believe that it is very there's an issue there where when a woman has an affair, it is instantly wrong and something's wrong with her. When a man has an affair, it's, well, yeah, of course, that's just his nature. And quite honestly,
he's virile and she is a Delilah to the Samson, trying to seduce, of course.
Exactly. And this is where I believe, as far as being a humanist, not just a feminist, I think it's degrading to men to say that their intelligence and their virtue is demolished with just one single offer. So I think that it should apply to both, that men should be extolled. They should be elevated to a higher level that says that you are more than just your genitalia, and the same with women.
I agree. What do you got on Change Your Life Technology as we end all of our segments, sponsored by yourcontractshop.com?
Well, I'm really excited about today's Change Your Life Technology because it's talking about chronic pain. And as you know, chronic pain is one of the leading causes of some of the addiction issues that we're dealing with. So there's an author, a PhD, Flavio Froelich, out of Carolina Center for Neurostimulation, who has found that actually stimulating the brain can treat chronic pain. Chronic pain isn't just the physical manifestation in the location of the pain. Researchers and clinicians are actually finding that the condition can reorganize how cells in the nervous system communicate with each other. So by stimulating those cells in the brain, they're able to rewire the brain and alleviate some of that chronic pain that isn't directly connected to the pain location itself.
Does that show anywhere where it is in particular, in the joints, in the hips, anything like that?
They're looking at lower back pain in particular, because obviously that's what we're dealing with, a lot of the nervous system in the spine.
Thank you. We need to wrap this edition of Think America there. Valir, thank you for your input. Love loved everything you said. Lori as well, part of Terry's Talkers for this edition, and Megan Porth. Find her at yourcontractshop.com. Always check out our podcast on thinkamericaradio.com or on iTunes or wherever you download your podcast. You've been listening to Think America with Terry Gilbert. Reason first, then converse. See you next time.